Well, let's try that again. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the data science section of the convention and the Committee 4. My name is Nashlan Portrag. I'm Head of Funds at Work and Distribution at Momentum Corporate. I'm also joined by my co-chair, Lindsay Shooters. Lindsay is a distinguished business journalist, editor, as well as storyteller in South Africa. He currently holds the role as business journalist at the Daily Maverick. I'm going to hand over to him now to introduce the speaker as well as the paper.
Hi guys, thank you for coming to the after lunch sessions. Our next speaker, Edwin Graham, is tackling a key challenge in his talk, practical considerations for elasticity modeling and price optimization. He's focusing on price elasticity, essentially how we model our customer sensitivity to price changes, and covering the specific data this requires and crucially stresses the need for applying essential actuarial judgment within the price optimization routine itself. Please give a warm welcome to Edwin.
Thank you very much indeed. So we made it to the second half of the second day, so I hope everyone's energized after lunch and looking forward to talking about price elasticity modeling and price optimization. I'm Edwin. I'm a data scientist. I'm not an actuary. So I always get a little bit of imposter syndrome when I'm in a room full of actuaries. But my background is in pricing in the UK, where demand modeling and price optimization are very well established. And in the South African market, more and more players are experimenting or using these techniques as well. So it's a good time for introducing this topic. So to kick things off, there is a spectrum of how demand is used in pricing today. So the very core foundation of pricing is the risk modeling, the risk-based pricing. And this will be true no matter if you're using demand or not. For many lines of business, it doesn't make sense to do anything other than focus purely on risk-based pricing, where prices are built up, the technical foundation purely based on claims frequency, claims severity, and so on. As we move through this spectrum, maybe there are some of you who are measuring demand. So you have a database of quotes or renewal invites, and you know who's converted and who hasn't. Maybe you're measuring, maybe you're even doing some modeling, and this is static modeling. So we're caring about the point estimate of whether someone is converting or not at our current prices, and maybe we're using those models or those measures to make some corresponding price adjustments. So where we're over-converting, maybe we adjust our prices up, and where we're under-converting, maybe we make a corresponding downwards price adjustment. The rest of my talk is going to be focused on the next two steps. So the next two steps are really where we're not just caring about that point estimate of how people are converting at our current prices, but we care about the derivative of our demand models with respect to price. So we care about the gradient, how that demand prediction is going to change as we move our prices away from our current price. These are price elasticity models, and we want these models to generalize well into spaces where we change our prices. And therefore, we can use them to do things like impact analysis. What if I change my prices to this strategy? What will my demand be? What will my gross written premium be? What will my loss ratio be? And then finally, on the far right-hand side, we have a full kind of price optimization framework where we incorporate all our assumptions about risk, demand, our variable costs into one framework, and we run an optimization routine. I'm not saying that everyone should move all the way to price optimization. It's not appropriate for every line of business, but maybe we can think about moving a bit more from the left to the right. So there are pros and cons to making that move from the left to the right. I'm going to start with the cons. So first of all, of course, anytime you introduce more layers and more sophistication into your prices, that's going to have some cost in actuarial resource to achieve. With modern tooling, that cost is lower than ever before, but it still exists and worth bearing in mind. There is always some risk involved in moving away from a pure risk-based approach. So first of all, there's financial risk. If our models, if we build models, we overfit, we make mistakes, and we rely too heavily on them, we could face some financial risk. In some situations, we could face reputational risk as well if we're running price optimization routines that are really taking advantage of vulnerable customers or putting the prices up very high in certain segments. It also could introduce price changes that could be unstable over time. Again, that's basically going to cost us financial risk, and maybe it lacks transparency, and maybe it's harder to work with. Maybe this costs us some time in our end-to-end pricing process, time that maybe could be better invested elsewhere. Those are the cons, but on the other side, we have the pros. So by taking demand and price elasticity into account, we can understand a lot better what will happen if we do make a pricing update, which is a huge advantage. It gives us the ability to deliver rates that generally are going to perform better and align better to our business targets. Hopefully, if we do things right, we're going to achieve better top-line results, better bottom-line results, yeah, those pros can certainly outweigh the cons in many situations. I want to give a definition of price elasticity. I've already used the term a few times. So price elasticity, I'm saying at a certain price point, because as you change your prices, the price elasticity will also change. But price elasticity at a certain price point is the percentage change in demand for a percentage change in price. The formula is up there. This is the formula I'm going to stick to, and just bear in mind it has a negative sign. So when I talk about a price elasticity of 2, I mean that the demand will reduce by 2% if you increase the price by 1%. So I'm assuming that negative relationship. So yeah, where price elasticity is low, it means that you can raise the price with only a small loss in demand, and where price elasticity is high, you can increase the demand with only a small reduction in price, and we're going to leverage that if we use price optimization or we use our dynamic demand models to make pricing decisions. So I'm going to talk a bit about modeling price elasticity, and then I'm going to talk about price optimization. There's nothing groundbreaking in anything that I'm going to say, but I'm hoping that for some of you at least, it may change a little bit about how you think about these tools. And I think the key thing that I want people to take away is that we do need to apply an actuarial mindset when we're using these techniques. And maybe too often I've seen that the actuaries build their technical prices from the ground up based on risk, and then they maybe hand over to a data science team who does some whizzy things with price optimization, changes the price a lot, and maybe those changes are not necessarily well justified actuarially, and maybe we need a stronger actuarial framework around using these techniques. So the first thing I want you to understand really is that elasticity modeling is different from risk modeling because we care about the causal relationship in how demand is going to change as we change price. So we want to understand the causal relationship between price and demand. In risk modeling, this is not the case. So in risk pricing, we care about accurately predicting the risk, no matter whether we're capturing causal relationship or not. So even if we're just using variables that are correlated with risk, that's okay. That gives us better prices. An example would be in motor pricing. We are very happy to use driver age as a variable to predict the risk. Driver age is not, does not have a causal relationship with the risk. It is the driver behavior that has a causal relationship with risk, and we know that driver age is very correlated with driver behavior, so we're happy to use it. In price elasticity modeling, we do need to think about causal relationships. So we don't only care about correlations fitting the best model to the data using machine learning techniques is not the only consideration. And the difficulty in validating and understanding that whether we've got a good model or not is trickier for price elasticity modeling, and that's because we don't measure directly a price elasticity from a customer. We know what the price offered was, we know whether they converted or not, but we don't know the counterfactual. We don't know whether they would have bought had the price been different. We don't know what price they would have bought at, what price would be the inflection point where they might have flipped from buying to not buying. I do recommend this book by Pearl and McKenzie, Book of Why, which is, I think, goes into great detail about the science of building causal models as opposed to building just pure statistical models where we're using correlation rather than causation. So it's definitely worth a read. So one useful tool that we can use to really capture the causal relationship is a random price test. And this is where we take the prices that we're pricing at today and we randomly allocate small price increases or decreases around that strategy. Usually this is done in a pseudo-random way, so the same person, if they quote multiple times, will always end up in the same bucket. So yes, this is really useful because by making it random, it means it is independent of the other characteristics. So we know that any change in demand that we can measure or model across the levels of our random price test, we know that that is caused by the change in price plus some random noise. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for our jobs, you can't get rid of random noise. Yeah, maybe it's definitely fortunate because if everything was easy to determine, we wouldn't need actuaries. But crucially, it is independent of the other policy characteristics. So we can look at the slope of how demand changes through the levels of a random price test, and that's going to tell us how sensitive customers are to a change in price. And the key consideration is that this can be different for different segments. So maybe younger policyholders are more price sensitive, and that slope will be steeper. Maybe older or people with higher wealth, maybe the slope will be shallower and they will be less price sensitive. And we need to have something that's random and independent. The premium itself is not independent, so premium doesn't explain the elasticity well. If we fit a curve through premium without doing a random price test, then we're not going to capture that price elasticity of demand well. The example here is we have a customer who's at a low price, 6,000 Rand, and we expect their conversion rate to be around 5%. Another customer whose price is that should be 12,000, I think, Rand, whose demand is half that. If we double the price of the low-risk customer and give the same price, do we expect their conversion rate to be the same as what we expect the high-risk customer? No, because they are a low-risk customer. So your competitors are also going to be offering low prices. If you double the price, the conversion rate's probably going to drop to almost nothing. So premium itself is just not independent of the other policy characteristics, and it's not as useful in explaining price elasticity as a random price test. We have this concept of static factors versus dynamic factors when we're building a demand model. So I said earlier that we care not only about the point estimate of demand, but we care about the derivative of our demand model with respect to premium. Static factors are factors whose derivative with respect to premium is 0. So if we change our price, these factors don't update. So if we use them in the model, they're not going to influence that derivative. So policyholder age is an example. If you double the price, the policyholder age stays the same. Sum insured. Any benchmark prices that are not actually the offered price, they also are static. So something like a modeled market price, that it could be very useful in a demand model, but this is static. And ratios of prices, if both prices are static, then the output is static. On the other hand, we have dynamic factors, and these will affect the gradient of our model predictions with respect to the price that's offered. So the price offered itself, of course, is dynamic. Any random price test factor that we use in our models is going to be dynamic. That's the point of it. And any sort of ratios of the price we offer to the customer with any of those benchmark prices is also going to be dynamic. So anytime we use those in the models, they're going to affect that gradient. They're going to affect the price elasticity of demand that falls out of those models. When we're going through a process of modeling demand, we want some certain things at the end of the day. So at the end result, we want a model that is smooth with respect to premium. So as we change the premium, we want our demand models to output a predicted demand that varies smoothly with the premium. So continuous, smooth, hopefully strictly monotonic. So you put the price up, the demand goes down. All else being equal, we want our processes to be fast. So we get the data, we want to get the insight as quickly as we can so we can act upon it and get the value of that data as soon as possible. We would like a process that is repeatable. So if we hand the same demand modeling process to two people within the company, we'd expect not necessarily identical results, but hopefully they would build similar models that would capture about the same value. Of course, we want our models to be accurate. We want to capture that causal relationship between price and demand. We want that to generalize well into the future. All else being equal, again, so there are some trade-offs, of course, between these properties, but all else being equal, we would like our models to be explainable. So we don't waste time trying to interrogate our models where the prediction comes from. It's easier to debug. It's safer. We understand what it's doing when we put it into production. And we do need to obviously we do need to consider how we're going to use that model when we're building it. So if we're putting a live optimization into production, we need to make sure that the data we're using is going to be available at production. I'm in a very privileged position in that working for a technology company, I get to see lots of examples of what different people are doing in different markets around demand modeling. And I would say, again, this is maybe a call out to you guys as the actuarial community. I don't believe that there's a single sort of best practice for demand modeling that's emerged in the market. I see many different techniques, mostly ones that work quite well, but maybe a bit different to each other. Some that seem very weird and strange. But broadly, the ones that work well fall into two broad buckets of approach. And the first approach is where we're really only using the price test factor to capture that gradient of how demand is going to vary as we change the price. So we're only using static factors in our model, the price test to capture the price sensitivity, and then maybe some interactions with the price test with the other factors, so that some segments of the portfolio, maybe we can see that they're more sensitive or less sensitive. And this can be a very good approach. I think it's the most scientific approach in a way, because, as I said, that price test factor is really the only it's the only way of really capturing that causal relationship, because it's the only factor that's completely independent of the other static factors. The other approach is to basically just throw things into a model. And this can work. In particular, I believe in markets where you have market price data available and you can reverse engineer your market prices. The ratio of the price you offer to the market price is a very predictive factor and dominates those models. And so these models can maybe more naturally capture how changes in price impact demand. On approach one, you have to find interactions, which can be tricky, it can be noisy. However, it isn't as scientific because we're using factors that have, are not purely independent. We're mixing static and dynamic effects together. And so it relies a bit more on modeler skill and judgment. And if we're not using the price test factor in the model, we at least need to do a lot of post-modeling validation with the price test factor to make sure that we don't just care that the point estimate is good, we care that the gradient is also appropriate. So how do we validate that gradient is appropriate? Well, we can't really use any traditional model metrics or techniques of that sort. So to measure whether that point estimate of demand is good, you can use log loss, AUC, the Gini of the model, the deviance of the model on holdout data, and you can see that the model is fitting well and not overfitting. But for the slope, that's very difficult because, like I said, we don't measure. We can't measure directly whether what a person's underlying price elasticity is. We only know whether they converted or not at your current prices. We don't know anything about the counterfactual, and we need models that generalize into a space that we haven't been pricing at. One validation technique that you can use for your traditional models that can be sort of mapped over into the elasticity world where we're looking at the gradient is lift curve. So it's not possible to measure someone's price elasticity of an individual directly, but when you have enough data, we can fit a slope through a price test and get a good point estimate of price elasticity of demand for a segment of data. And you can do it by fitting a model as described, so just a pure logistic regression model with just that one factor, the price test factor. And out of that, we can get a good point estimate for a population. And we can even get some standard errors of the coefficients of the model you fitted, and actually get a range of acceptable price elasticity for that segment. And so we can use this in a way to validate our demand models. So we can take our portfolio, split it into key segments, and for each key segment, check that the price elasticity that's being predicted by our models matches what a simple model, as I've described, would suggest is the elasticity for that profile. And we can do this based on the predictions of our models. So we can break. So I should say that to get a measure of what the price elasticity being predicted is, you can do a bit of calculus and look at the gradient of the prediction, or you can use some numerical methods. But you can always understand what the model is predicting the elasticity to be. And yes, you can use this technique when the data size is big enough to check that your predicted elasticity is sort of matching what you're seeing on some holdout data. And we can do the equivalent of a lift curve in that price elasticity space. So we can split our data up into segments based on how price sensitive the model is predicting that segment to be, and seeing does the price elasticity being predicted match what we actually see when we just fit a simple curve through the price test. We've tried this on some real data. So this is my colleagues have run a case study. This is working with a large data set of motor quotes. This is from a European insurer. There was a price test running in a period. The data set is relatively large, so it's in the order of hundreds of thousands of quotes and thousands of sales in that time period. We fit two different types of demand model. A GLM, a two-step derivative lasso. I'm going to go into a bit more detail about how that model was built. And a smooth GBM, again, I'll go into more detail about how that model was built. On some of the training data, we split the data into training and holdout. So the average price elasticity on the data set was around 2. And we built models with static factors and the price test factor only. And in this case, there was no market price data available, so we didn't have that kind of ratio of price to predicted market price as a predictor in these models. So the first approach, this is a GLM. Derivative lasso is just a way of automating a GLM. We built it in 2 steps. So this is the key thing. The first step, we fit a GLM model only using static variables and avoiding anything that was too correlated with the price test factor. So that model, model 1, is essentially a point estimate of demand at our current prices. And we're leaving, we have a price test factor, so we're leaving that ready to sort of capture how the slope of demand changes. And so step 2, we use step 1 as an offset, and we fit a curve through price test, or a straight line through the price test factor. And then we allow that price test factor to interact with other static factors, so such that slope can vary from profile to profile. I said it's 2-step derivative lasso, and I've outlined 3 steps, but basically 2 and 3 are steps that you do simultaneously. And derivative lasso is an approach where you're applying some regularization. So the intercept of the model and the initial slope of the price test are fit with no regularization. Everything else is fit with some regularization. So it's actually a lasso regularization. And the regularization step 2 is stronger than in step 1. So this is the sort of form of the model. We have the blue part of the formula is describing the static effects. We have log of the price test factor times some sort of dynamic effects using the static the other static factors. The other approach we used was a smooth GBM. So we fit a GBM to demand data, throwing in everything. So all the static factors and the price test factor. And GBM, by its nature, will find interactions, deep interactions. So it will find interactions with the price test factor just by default. So we will allow that slope to vary feature by feature. Yeah. Naturally, it will fit interactions between the static factors and the price test factor. And the problem with a GBM for demand models is that the output is not smooth. So there is a post-processing step where we scored the model for each level of the price test factor and fit a smooth slope through that for each profile to get a smooth prediction for that slope, the gradient. This is what the output predicted elasticity looks like for the 2-step lasso. It's, like I said, the average is around 2. This looks fairly reasonable. There's nothing where the slope is going in the wrong direction, and we get a reasonable spread. The question is this spread actually justified? So on the holdout data, we did that approach that I talked about before. We're fitting. This is basically it's a lift curve, but a lift curve in that elasticity domain where we're looking at the gradient. So on the x-axis we have the predicted elasticity. We've split our data, our holdout data, into bins based on the elasticity that was being predicted for each profile, 6 bins. For each bin, we then we have the predicted elasticity that coming from the model, and we have a measured price elasticity that's coming from a very, very simple model where we just take that subset of data and fit just one slope through the price test. You can see the error bars are pretty large. For the most part, the predicted elasticity more or less matches what we're measuring. The last bucket, maybe it doesn't predict so well. It's just within the error bar, though. So it's doing a reasonable job. What you find is when you do this, you're breaking the data into smaller and smaller sizes, so that when you fit a slope, there is more and more standard error, and it does get noisy. So you do need enough volume of data really to take this approach. For the smooth GBM, we also got a reasonable range of predicted price elasticity. It was a bit narrower than the GLM. And we did the same thing. And in this case, we found that there was almost no relation between the elasticity that was being predicted in the model and the elasticity that we were measuring when we just fit that simple GLM, just using the price test for each one of those buckets. And if we look at a double lift curve, because you can also do this, this is where we're looking at the absolute difference in predicted elasticity between those two models on the x-axis. And we can see the predicted elasticity of each of the two models for each of those bins. Again, you can see that the GLM is much more within a reasonable touching distance of what we're measuring than the GBM. So I'm not saying that GBMs are terrible and should never be used in demand modeling. Actually, the GBM had much better model metrics on the point estimate. So on the holdout data, the log loss, the Gini, and so on were much, much better on the GBM. So what I think really is the key is building the model in two steps. So I think it's definitely possible to build a GBM on just using static factors and use that as an offset, and then fit slopes with a GLM. So you can probably definitely get a better model using both approaches than using just one of them. But my takeaways are that you do need enough data because it is very noisy, but this lift curve equivalent is a very good way of checking that the output of your price elasticity models is appropriate and will generalize well when we put it in production in spaces where we're changing our prices. My other takeaway is that models that do a good job capturing that first order point estimate effect of demand don't necessarily do a very good job capturing that second order derivative of how the demand is going to change as we change the prices. And I do think building in two steps is a very useful approach. Like I said, I think we built the GLM in two steps. The first step we maybe could have actually, rather than fit a GLM, we could have fit a GBM and used that as the offset. And I think that would have worked better than either of those two approaches. Unfortunately, we ran out of time to test all of these. But yeah, another takeaway is that I think too often actuarial teams cede these tasks to data science teams who just care about doing whizzy things and getting hyperparameter tuning and getting the best deviance on the holdout data, and maybe don't consider as much what the impacts are going to be. The actuarial profession has all of those professional standards and all of that thinking sort of embedded into your training, and I think there is no, I don't think, consensus best practice that's emerged in this space, and I think maybe it's up to you guys to come up with that. I'm going to talk then a little bit about how we can use these models in a price optimization, and then there'll be Q&A. So what is price optimization? It's a formal procedure that gets the quote-unquote best results given a set of assumptions. So this is where we're going to tie all of our models, assumptions together into one framework. So we have our risk models, our variable costs, any other revenue we want to take into account, so add-ons or lifetime value, and crucially, of course, our demand and price elasticity models. And we're going to try and maximize something, some value, with some constraints, usually a constraint on volume on top line, maybe some other constraints around the kind of portfolio that we want to write. The reason why best is in quotes is because it's only best assuming that your input models are true. So anytime that you've done any overfitting, or there are data errors, or the future doesn't look like your historical data in some way that you're not taking into account, it won't deliver you the strategy that's going to be, in practice, the best. But it will, and this is why sometimes, price optimization, it can be quite over-optimistic, because it's going to tell you that you're going to get a really good result, and maybe you've overfit a couple of models, and maybe it moves you in a direction. It does improve your results, but maybe not as much as it's expecting, because it's expecting your input assumptions to be the ground truth, which really they aren't. Like I said, usually we are trading off volume for value in a price optimization. For the most part, when you put your prices up, your bottom line, your value is going to increase, and your top line, your volume is going to decrease. That's not true in every segment of your portfolios, but for the most part, that's true. And the optimization is going to trade off that top line for bottom line. Actually, go back to the balance. So basically, for some policies you can put the price up, and by doing that you are increasing the value, and maybe you're not losing that much volume. So that trade-off is favourable for putting the prices up. And for other areas, maybe you can sort of buy back some of the volume that you've lost more cheaply by lowering prices a smaller amount and getting a lot more, because it's a more price elastic segment. And the efficient frontier really sort of shows this. If we run our optimization with different constraints on the top line volume, we will get different results for each constraint that we put in, and we can sort of join them together in a frontier. So on the frontier, each point on that frontier represents a specific pricing strategy that's been optimized with that top line constraint. You cannot, assuming that your input models are true, you cannot achieve anything that is above and to the right of that line. And there may be many strategies that are below and inside that line. Some of them might actually in practice perform better, but assuming your inputs are true, which is what your optimization will do, they will perform worse. They are suboptimal. And if you introduce stronger constraints, so maybe you're constraining your optimization to make price adjustments that are in a narrower range, by making it more constrained, essentially what you're doing is fitting a frontier within a frontier, which is what is represented by this black line. Maybe that's an appropriate thing to do, because of course your demand models, we know, were built on price tests around your current premium. The further away you price from the prices that were in place when you built your demand models, the less sure we're going to be that the models generalize well. So having suitable constraints is really important. Again, this is where you want that actuarial oversight and governance in the process. There are two types of price optimization. So individual optimization and rating structure optimization. Individual optimization is where, for each profile in your book, you're going to generate an individual price adjustment, such that the overall result is optimal. This is the most mathematically optimal way of optimizing. It's actually a very simple routine, because it's you can split it out into optimizing in each individual row of data. The results are not very transparent, though, because you end up just having, for each profile on your book, you have a price adjustment, and it's not too easy to reverse engineer and understand why a specific profile got a specific price. And this is a routine that we need to run every single time we need to generate a new price for a new profile. On the other hand, we have a rating structure optimization. So this is where we're also going to do some optimization, but it's even more constrained. So this is, again, it's a frontier within a frontier because we have a constraint that the results must be describable by a set of rating tables. This means that we get transparent results out. We have a set of rating tables, so that adjust your price. We can look at those and see why people got the right price. It's a simple structure that can be implemented easily. It is less mathematically optimal because it comes with that additional constraint. However, in my view, it maybe has some regularizing effect as well on your optimization. Like I said, the optimization is going to always assume that your inputs are the ground truth, when in reality, we're always going to fit to some noise. Your model's always going to have some variance in them. And an individual optimization maybe takes advantage in those areas where really those price changes aren't really that justified. We may be adding variance into our prices. And the rating structure optimization can have a regularizing effect and actually probably does a little bit better relative to individual optimization than would be predicted by your models. And yeah, one more downside is it's a more complex routine to run in the first place. Yeah. I want to say something on lifetime value. So I said you're trading off some measure of volume for some measure of value. That measure of value can be defined any way you want. So it could be the margin or contribution to fixed expenses in your current year, or you could start taking into account of future year. And I think the cleanest, strongest use case for where we really want to include lifetime value considerations in our pricing is in pet pricing. And that's because the typical risk curve for pets goes something like this, where it starts off relatively low risk, but goes even lower and then starts ticking up quite dramatically as the pet gets older. So the risk is going to change very strongly in the later years. But in the early years, this is where people tend to buy the insurance, and they tend to stay with the same provider usually for the lifetime of the pet. And once they start claiming, there can be barriers to switching as well. So that tends to be the case. So really, we want to maybe reduce our prices in this area where we know it's going to have a high lifetime value because they're going to stick with us for quite a long time, but they're more price sensitive because this is the point in time when they're looking for insurance. My advice is always to avoid complexity where it doesn't add value. So a lifetime value optimization where you're modeling how risk is going to change year on year on year. You're modeling how demand is going to change year on year on year. And this can be very complex to build and even more complex to maintain and run in production. And it can have minimal differences with running a single year optimization. So my advice is always to maybe run it once and see what the difference between a 1 year optimization and a lifetime value optimization is, and maybe see if we can incorporate those effects in a simpler way. Because I think complexity really needs to be adding value, and lifetime value optimization could be super complex and add marginal effects that maybe are real, and we want to take consideration of them, but we can maybe do that in a simpler way. If we do move to a lifetime value optimization, by definition, that's going to be suboptimal over a single year, and that's because like I said, the single year optimization is designed to be optimal over 1 year. So any movement away from that is by definition going to be suboptimal. So if you do move from a single year optimization to a lifetime value optimization, you're always giving up some value in year one. The idea is that you're going to more than get it back as the policy ages, but of course the future is less certain than the present, so I think we do need to take some care if we move in this direction. I've got a couple more slides and then questions. So a question that's very often asked is price optimization fair to customers? And my view is that price optimization itself is neither fair nor unfair. It's just a tool that we can use, and we can use it in ways that are very fair. We can use it in ways that are potentially unfair. We have a duty to treat our customers fairly. We also have a duty to cover our expenses efficiently so we can carry on paying out claims to our customers in future years. And optimization is a tool that can help us do that. These duties are not in conflict with each other. So one way you can use optimization that I think is super fair, and I don't think anyone can complain about, is that there are going to be segments of the portfolio where we're pricing, our prices today are uncompetitive. And if your optimization is running well, very likely we're going to be reducing our prices in those segments and maybe increasing our prices slightly elsewhere to rebalance. I don't think anyone can complain about that. On the other hand, of course it's possible to build an optimization framework that is unfair. There are customers that are vulnerable, that face barriers to switching providers, whose price elasticity is going to be very, very low if we model it. And if we don't take care, we could raise their price year on year on year to the point where they're paying well over the odds for their insurance. So we need to have, we need to take this into account. We need to understand the impacts of any optimization that we run and take mitigating actions and building constraints and guardrails to make sure that this doesn't happen. This is my last slide, I promise. Yes, you can read. So the properties of a successful price optimization process. The rest of the slides I had coming up one by one, but this is all at once. So we do want, if we have a price optimization process, we run it every fortnight, every month, and each time we run it, our prices are flipping. Now we're increasing the prices for young drivers. Now we're decreasing them. That's telling you that you're adding variance into your models are overfitting. You're adding variance into your process. Your prices are unstable. We definitely don't want to do that. So we need to sort of monitor that the price optimization process is relatively stable over time. Of course, things do change over time. There are trends in time that we do want to take into account, but we don't want things to turn on their head every fortnight. We want to be baking in stable trends into our prices that are going to improve our bottom line over a long period. All else being equal, which it isn't, there are trade-offs, but all else being equal, it'd be great if our price optimization was transparent, so we understood why some profiles are getting price increases or decreases. And this is going to help us run the process faster the next time we run it. And often speed to market is more important really than having the super sophisticated, most complex rates on the market. We need our, I've already talked about it, we need the impacts on our customers to be fair and justifiable. Optimization is another layer into the pricing that's adding complexity to the pricing process. So we really need to not just be adding complexity constantly, we need to have that focus on where is the complexity adding value. We need to have some process where we can keep reviewing this and removing complexity where it isn't adding value or isn't adding enough value for the complexity that we're baking into the process. And we want to have good controls in place. Like I said, I think it can be a mistake for the actuarial team to build out all the technical prices and then hand everything over to a data science team who does whizzy things in an uncontrolled way without that actuarial mindset on top. With that, thank you very much for listening, and we have time for Q&A.
Yeah, we have about 9 minutes. So please keep them short.
Yes.
There is a roving mic, one at the back there, and then one in front here.
Thanks, really good talk, really insightful on price optimization. So you mentioned at the start something about testing price elasticity
Yes.
practically. So, and you mentioned something about keeping it consistent so that the same customer coming to you would guarantee, the same price again, like in I don't know,
Yes.
I imagine a couple of days time or something.
Yeah.
So how do you practically do that? So I think you said pseudo-random.
Pseudo-random. So
yeah.
a good idea is to use some characteristics of the policy that you're not using for pricing. So it could be like the last digit of the zip code, or it's useful to use a few of these. So maybe whether the date of birth or something, that one of the digits of the date of birth plus the last digit of the postcode, with maybe the last digit of a registration number, something that's sort of random enough that it's not correlated with the rest of the pricing factors, but will be the same the next time that the customer comes to quote.
Would you say that's like A/B testing?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Okay.
I mean, yes, it is. One other thing to bear in mind is that if you're going to do price testing over multiple years, maybe it's good to have tenure in there or something that's related to tenure, because you don't want the same customers to be getting price tested upwards every year. You want the price test the next year to be independent of a price test the year before. Hope that answers your question.
Cool. Up here.
Cool. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have any insights to share on like the actual methods of optimization that you found are useful? Like, so once you have your demand model,
Yep.
running that optimization, I guess there's constraints that it presents in terms of being able to do that quickly if you want to do it live. But do you have any insights to share on what methods you found to optimize?
Most optimization tools that you will find, including ours, but also our competitors, will be using Lagrange optimization to do individual optimization. Like I said, the rate factor optimization is more complex. Individual optimization is pretty simple. You want to look up Lagrange multipliers. This is a way of taking an optimization of a portfolio and reducing it to optimizing each individual row. So you end up plotting a sort of function where you're taking the maximum point of that function for each individual row. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, is it like efficient? Like, does that have runtime constraints?
So individual optimization can be pretty quick. Certainly it is in our tool. So, yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Up here in front.
Thanks for the presentation. Just two questions.
Yep.
The first is when you talked about the validation that you do, that you'd use a simpler model. Sorry, terminology.
Yes.
But you'd use a simpler model.
Yes.
But then we said initially we're trying to actual model the causative
The causal.
effects.
Yeah.
Now, if when we're trying to do the random
Price test.
price
Yep.
test, right? We said we might not have enough data.
Yes.
Or it's sometimes we actually make assumptions.
Yeah.
Now, if you're validating something using using another model, can't we not potentially introduce bias into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is no way around the fact that we don't have a measured, price elasticity for each customer to validate our models against. So yes, it is a model, but it's the sort of most simple model, and maybe we can use like I said, the standard error that comes out of those model coefficients to not just have a point estimate of demand, but have a reasonable spread. The other thing you said, yes, it can be very noisy. So, however much noise you think there is on that first order point estimate, there's more noise when you're trying to understand the gradient of demand with respect to price. So you do need large volumes of data unfortunately, to run this approach.
Okay. And also on that gradient approach,
Yep.
if I just conceptually, if I think about it, you might have a different distribution for when you're increasing prices versus when you're decreasing prices. And
Yes.
if we use the one slope,
Yes.
is that actually sufficient, or should we have two different kind of models, one for increasing, one for decreasing?
So it's a very good point, and you can be right for sure. We have the first order effect, which is what is the demand, the point estimate of demand at my current prices. We have the second order effect, which is the slope, and then maybe we have a third order effect, which is how does that slope change? Does it change more steeply as I increase prices, or is it more shallow? So that third order effect is even more noisy. If we start treating price increases different to price decreases, essentially we're halving the amount of data on each side of that divide. It just increases the risk of overfitting. Yes, it might be more true in some respects. It is a model. There may not be a single slope for each customer that generalizes well out as we move our prices away. But it's a simplifying assumption that it's sort of single slope. If we do, we could assume that it's a different slope below and above, but it just would make it even harder not to overfit. But it might work. It might work if you have enough data.
Okay. Sorry.
Yep.
Big questions.
Oh,
Just the last that's the last question on the A/B testing.
Yes.
How practical will it be? Because I think that's if anyone were going to use like this elasticity, how feasible is it will be to do like A/B testing, and also maybe during the normal process of a company where you send out, unless it's an annual renewable policy, and then you're sending out quotes the next year to say, okay, we're increasing this, and you see how the customer is reacting with regards to maybe the market price. Is there anything else you can do to actually get more information to see how your customer base would?
Yeah. So I do think best practice when you have market competitor data might be different from best practice when you don't, because it's such a powerful tool in demand modeling that's super predictive. I forget what your first question was. It's the first part of the question.
Is there anything else you could do?
You mentioned A/B testing. So A/B testing, I didn't really talk about A/B testing, but if you have the ability to put two strategies into production at the same time, that can be really useful so there's another way of validating your demand models, because that will give you data that was on who converts or not at a different pricing strategy. So if you build your model on pricing strategy A and you validate it on pricing strategy B, then part of what you're validating is how the demand has shifted across those two strategies. So it definitely helps in validating your demand models if you can do some A/B testing. I'm not sure if I completely answered all of the points that you raised. I think we're probably running out of time.
Yeah, we are out of time.
Thank
Thank you
you
very much, Edwin.
All right. Thank you.
I know there was another hand at the back, but if you can maybe grab.